Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for April 16th, 2018. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Yes. Mrs. Bradford.
Here.
Mrs. Burton. Here. Mr. Centers.
Here.
Mrs. Frank.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis has let us know that she won't be here this evening. Mrs. Bonifield is here. President Johnson.
Here. We have a quorum. Mrs. Jarvis is en route from New York, where she was chaperoning some of our students over the weekend. So, Mrs. Frank, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening for all of those in our audience and at home. You'll note that we are operating this evening under some difficult circumstances. There's no power here in the board office, so we're doing the best that we can. For those who are here, if you want to get one of our agendas, you can go out the door and turn to the right and you'll see them. Anybody at home who will be watching this, you can look at the agenda for Monday, April 16th. You'll be seeing this hopefully on the 17th. If those are tuning in, we're going to hope to have it uploaded by then. Again, good evening. We're going to try and get through this the best that we can. Tonight is a regular meeting, which is our voting meeting. As we've indicated in the past, you won't see the level of communication or discussion that you might see at a committee of the whole meeting, because we've typically gone over the items that are on the agenda at least twice beforehand. If you really want to listen to the down and dirty and nitty-gritty discussion on these, tune into our committee of the whole meetings. That's where you'll see most of the things going on. One of the other things that I wanted to advise everyone tonight as we go through the agenda, because we have limited resources tonight, items under 3, A, B, C, D, and E will be moved to our May 7th meeting, because this would involve a number of people coming in, and it would be very difficult for them to do so under these conditions. Again, one of the things that this board has strived for over the last year or so is respect. And we take that issue very seriously, and we're talking about respect not from just student to student, but to adult and adult to student. And we on the board intend to treat everyone that comes into this room and addresses the board with respect, and we would ask that anyone who addresses the board address us with respect as well. So we're going to get going with 3F, and I'm going to turn it over at this time to Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, President Johnson. Pleased to provide some updates for the district this evening. We have some highlights for you, and again, we look forward to having all of those who were supposed to be our special guests this evening, as President Johnson said, on May 7th as part of our communications items. Last week, our Fine Arts Festival opened up, and so the Fine Arts Festival is an annual event. It's been taking place for many, many years. It is held graciously by the folks at the Livonia Civic Center Library. Our students in grades K through 12 create really creative and unique pieces of art using many different mediums, and the grand opening was last Monday, and the exhibit will be up through the end of the month. So if you did not have a chance to go to the opening, perhaps see your own child's artwork or those of a classmate, or just enjoy the talents of our wonderful students, please be sure to stop by the Civic Center Library, and that display will continue through the end of April. I think we may have mentioned at our last meeting that our learners are taking this opportunity over these next few weeks to show all that they know. We have M-STEP testing going on, and it started for our 5th and 8th graders on Monday, April 9th. They will be assessed in ELA, math, science, and social studies. Our My Access testing for our special needs students also began. And our SAT and PSAT testing for our 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders took place on April 9th and 10th last week. We will continue later this month with our M-STEP testing for our 3rd and 4th graders as well. Be sure to mark your calendars. We love to share the events going on at our beautiful performing arts centers. So Franklin's PAC has hosted a number of wonderful performances, and we are looking forward to the Franklin Players hosting a wonderful dinner theater experience. So it's a bit of a unique opportunity to both have dinner and watch a show. That will be on May 10th and 11th, both at 7 p.m. We have some of our very impressive robotics students here this evening. I think they have some great news to share with you. So although I had a couple of updates that I was going to celebrate in our remarks this evening, I think I won't steal their thunder because I believe they're going to share some things during audience communications. Needless to say, we are so proud of all of you and all of the members of your 2 teams, and we can't wait to hear from you this evening. So today, as President Johnson shared, we not only had a power outage here at Central Office, we also experienced over the weekend a power outage at about 10 of our school locations. We were really pleased to note that most of them came back on through the evening and overnight hours yesterday, but unfortunately this complex remained closed, and so that presented a significant challenge with regard to our inability to run our transportation services for about 8,000 students. So that necessitated our district closing today, and we have a plan in place. We have our temporary power being serviced to our transportation department through backup generators. Those have been set up by our maintenance and operations folks today, so we are ready to go. School will be back on tomorrow, and Randolph has been restored power as well. So I think this is the only site that does not have power, but because we were able to get the generator going back in transportation, we will have our buses running, we'll have our schools open, and we look forward to welcoming our students back. Just this evening, the district shared a communication with parents to let them know a little bit about challenges we had this morning with regard to our notification system, referred to as EduLink, which sends out our robocalls and our email blasts. So although we attempted to get the word out in many different forms, our most important form, the phone calls that go out to each of the households, to our staff, and to our families, EduLink is a system, the parent company experienced some significant issues that impacted many districts across Wayne County today. They have been working on that, and it was resolved by about 4 o'clock this afternoon, so we are now able to continue sending those messages, and so we appreciate everyone's patience, and we had lots of folks hopping in today and helping us spread the word. So whether it was Twitter or Facebook or phone calls, we appreciated everyone's help, and we know that certainly an inconvenience when families and staff don't get those calls, but we're pleased to know that EduLink has worked hard to solve that issue, and we are anxious to get school back in session tomorrow. So thanks, President Johnson, for letting me share those updates.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist, and thank you to your staff, cabinet, for, people don't see all the work that went into today. They see schools were closed and it was a day off. It was a monumental task to get us ready this evening to be here and to get everything ready for tomorrow. So on behalf of the board, thank you for everything that you guys did to get us going for tomorrow. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We have as you know, we have tremendous staff here, and our folks were busy yesterday checking out all of our schools and our facilities, and I appreciate that, and we will pass that along to all of the members of our team. Thank you.
All right, then we'll move on to item 3G, written communications. Are there any written communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to audience communication. This is the time when the board sets aside to listen to any concerns or any things along those lines that the community may bring forward to us. It is a time for the board to listen. It's not a question and answer period. We generally don't interact. We do, as you see on the blue slips, limit our presentations to 3 minutes per. I don't think we're going to have a problem with that tonight, since I only have one blue slip. So we'll get right into it. And Aaron Robinson. Hi, Aaron.
Hey.
Want to come up to the podium over here?
Sure. I signed up for all of our robotics representatives tonight.
That's fine.
We're all coming to talk to you.
Hi,
You got
my
enough room there?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Iris. I'm a senior captain, and I also do electrical, and I'm on drive team. And I attend Franklin, and we are members of the Livonia Warriors robotics team.
My name is Miko. I'm a CAD designer on the robotics team. I also do mechanical, and I'm also a member of drive team. I'm a senior captain as well. I attend Churchill, and our team consists of 10th, 11th, and 12th graders from all 3 high schools. Firstly, Livonia Warriors and the Tyros team would like to update you about our season thus far.
The Livonia Warriors have competed in Lincoln, Livonia, and Grand Rapids. The team made it to elimination rounds in both Lincoln and Livonia. However, had a rough end in Grand Rapids due to mechanical failures. However, this season we did win both a First Creativity Award and a First Quality Award, of which we are very proud.
My name is Sean Andrus, and I'm a junior captain of the Livonia Warriors, and I attend Stevenson. I enjoy positions on the drive team, safety, and mechanical squad. In addition to our district events, the Livonia Warriors had also qualified for states, where they attended this past weekend in Saginaw and made it to the eliminations. We also won a state-level award in safety, the Hard Hat Award, and qualified for world competition for the World Championship to be held this season at Coble Hall and Ford Field in Detroit. Come on, how cool is that?
In addition to the great work the Warriors have done this year, our new primarily 9th grade rookie team, the Tyros team, are off to a great start.
My name is Yejwan, and I Vanguard matches for the Tyros team.
And my name is Pranav, and I also Vanguard matches for the Tyros team. And Tyros means young soldier or new recruit in Latin.
We are primarily 9th graders from all 3 high schools as well. Pranav and I attend Churchill. This is our first season, and it has been truly amazing.
The Tyros team has much to report. This first season was a season of astounding accomplishments, making the eliminations at both Lincoln and Livonia, winning a Rookie All-Star Award at Lincoln, and the highest Rookie Seed Award at both Lincoln and Livonia, and last but not least, qualifying to compete at the states. What an honor our first year was. Competition at the state level was a real challenge for us, but we stood our ground and received a state-level Rookie Inspiration Award. We still are taking it all in.
Both Livonia teams have worked together and supported each other with tremendous amount of respect. Parents and mentors support both Livonia teams equally. It was amazing to see the amount of people from Livonia all the way out to Saginaw to root for our teams. Our cheering section was Livonia proud with banners and flags.
Gear up, Livonia. Our veteran team, the Livonia Warriors, is heading to World Championships in Detroit this year, in 2 weeks, too. So.
Hi, I'm Aaron Robinson. I'm an award presenter and communications member on the Livonia Warriors. Superintendent Oquist, we brought you more yard sign stickers. We also brought you state qualifier and a world qualifier.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. I can't wait to add them to our sign. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
We're going back to Dickinson because we got cake.
Thank you.
We're jealous.
Congratulations.
Sorry.
We're
Good luck
so
with the Worlds,
excited for you
guys.
guys.
Carlini, do you have dates for the Worlds?
Yes.
Or you'll get them to us.
April 25th, 24th, 25th, and 26th,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
That last, yeah,
Weekend. Okay.
that week, yeah.
Thank you. Good work.
Good work.
All right, then we'll go to 3I, response to prior audience communication. I do not have any. Does anyone else have any? Seeing none, then we'll move to item 4, consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public School District approve the following consent agenda item as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of March 19, 2018.
Support. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton,
Yes.
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Now I'll take us to item 6A. Approval of bid results for summer 2018 roofing projects sinking fund. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mr. Centers.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation of the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to award the contracts for roofing replacements at Holmes Middle School to Lutz Roofing Company, Shelby Township, Michigan, in the amount of $2,243,400, and at Franklin High School, Central Office Warehouse Building, and Central Office Transportation Building to J.D. Chandler Roofing Company, Livonia, Michigan, in the amount of $448,500 for a total project cost of $2,907,252, including the contingency in the amount of $215,352, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contract.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Burton. Mr. Francis, you can be helping us with that?
Yes, sir. This is a planned sinking fund project based upon a review that the district had of all of its district building roofs. We had come up with an order based upon the time that we believe, I should say, this quality or state that we believe based upon the report that our roofs are in. And we've chosen these items: the full tear off at Holmes Middle School, a full tear off at the Central Office Transportation Building, and then partial replacements at the Warehouse Building and Franklin High School, to be among our first for this sinking fund project in the summer of 2018. We do come forward to the recommendation of Lutz Roofing and J.D. Chandler Roofing Company, both as described in the resolution. And we do recommend board approval of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Centers.
When it comes to the roofs that are being replaced, these were very much at the end of their lives.
Correct. These are, in the case where there are sections of a roof, such as Franklin High School, overall, we're doing a rather small portion of the entirety of Franklin, and those portions are in what can be surmised to be in a 1 to 2 year life left in them. So and that is the same with all the roofs that we're doing in this cycle. These are in the greatest need, the greatest disrepair, and the greatest need of changing in the district based upon the full investigation and report that we were given by RTA during the school year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Francis, for the benefit of the community, this is going to be an ongoing process as we move forward. These are the ones that are in most need at this point.
Yes.
But we've had the evaluation of the remainder of our buildings.
Yes.
On when we expect that they will need to be repaired as well. I mean,
Yes, we have a full report on all of our buildings, and they've actually been designated through a weighted score, and their relative condition we have from greatest need to in best condition in rank order, and we will begin summer after summer picking out the ones that are in the greatest need of repair and replacement, and we'll be working on replacing those roofs. Many of our roofs are over 20 years old. Most of them, at least in sections of the larger buildings, were done in the 90s and into the early 2000s. So as we take a long view on this, this is a planned summer sinking fund project, summer over summer, so that we can have our roofs and obviously not only repaired, but you wouldn't want to take them all on at one time. It's physically impossible to have the time and enough manpower to get that. But also B, you wouldn't want 25 roofs failing in the same year in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers to approve the bid results for the summer 2018 roofing project sinking fund, supported by Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion passes, thank you. That'll take us to item 6B, approval of bid results for Phase 3 paving projects sinking fund. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to approve Nagel Paving Company, Novi, Michigan, for paving projects at Frost Middle School and Grant Elementary in the amount of $177,380, plus a contingency of $26,607, for a total cost of $203,987, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Burton. And Mr. Francis, you'll be addressing this for us as well?
Yes, sir. Again, this is a sinking fund project that we have. As you know, we've been doing paving projects summer over summer in an effort to repave and repair the aged pavement that we have across the district. This year we've gone in 3 phases simply because as they were designed and bid, we were bringing them to the board. This is 3 of 3, and we have 2 smaller projects here at Grant Elementary. We are providing more parking spaces at Grant Elementary's parking lot. Some of this was with the convergence of more students at Grant for this school year. We have found the need to have additional parking, so we'll be putting on a little bit more parking. It will be restriping and growing how many spaces we have available. And the other part of it is a smaller project at Frost. The north the north driveway entrance will be redone. This is in conjunction with the City of Livonia paving the Stark Road project. And what we'll do is we'll drop the elevation of our driveway in, which is pretty steep right now, and then tie in and repair the areas back into the Stark Road.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Barrett.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
at our committee of the whole meeting, we discussed the possibility of putting a second walkway across the Grant parking lot as it was, as the design was presented to the board. Is there an update on that, or is that something that the administration is still looking at?
No, actually, I spoke with administration over at Grant, asked to review what they had. What we ended up coming up with was, I think, a fairly creative idea for some new paint. It won't change any of the spots, at least it won't lower the number of spots that we have. Grant's parking lot, the way it's structured with a one-way, then looping one-way out, has enough space in their aisles that we can spread out the interior angled parking spaces and drop a 3-foot walkway in between to be able to guide students and parents, as opposed to going behind cars, in between the cars, to be able to get to the walkway that's also delineated on the pavement with paint to get across. And that's on the southern portion at the front door. And we'll also tick one across to get from the furthest west area, so they won't play Frogger going through the parking lot.
Thank you.
If that reference makes sense to any more people.
Yes.
Some of us
It does.
does, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Mrs. Frank.
Mr. Francis, so when we looked at the map, if the top is north, and I'm not sure if that's
It
north,
is.
and the bottom is south, so there's one at the north and one at the south, is that what you're saying? Or
No, take north all the way down to south, and there'll be a 3-foot walkway that you can just, there won't be cars in it, they'd be on either side. You would just walk in between either way till you get to the crosswalk.
It would be like pushing the
Pushing the
front
cars
of the cars
out.
back,
Okay.
and there'll be a 3-foot walkway coming all the way down, so no matter where you're parking, you would walk all the way down
Through the
and then go across.
and then over.
And then go across to the crosswalk. So you wouldn't be walking behind cars that may not see you as they're backing up. You'd be walking in front of parked cars
Right.
that
Between the headlights.
are nosed to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
with your indulgence, President Johnson, I
Yes.
think that this is such an important issue as a board, as we're talking about this, and we're investing this much money. So thank you to your staff for going back and just coming up with a creative solution for it, because I think that it's very vital that our parking lots are safe places. And so as we're just talking about creating more parking spaces to make sure it's safe for our kids. So I thank you for
You're welcome.
going back and for the staff looking at it again. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford to approve bid results for Phase 3 paving projects, supported by Mrs. Burton. Would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton,
Yes.
Mr. Centers,
Yes.
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion passes. Thank you. That'll move us down to item 6C, approval to purchase buses. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Burton.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of 9 77-passenger school buses through the Michigan School Business Officials Bus Purchasing Program for a total cost of $749,691.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mrs. Smith, you'll help us with
Thank you
this.
very much. As we discussed at our study session and the committee meeting, we maintain a fleet of 110 school buses. We were fortunate enough through the 2013 bond to purchase 66 new school buses, which leaves us with 44 buses ranging in age from 2004 to 2008. What this purchase will allow us to do is retire 9 of our oldest buses, the 2004 buses, and then replace them with these new buses.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford for the approval to purchase buses. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton,
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mr. Centers,
Yes.
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, motion passes. That takes us to item 4D, approval to purchase maintenance department vehicles. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of 4 2018 Ford Transit T150 utility vans, 2 2018 Ford Transit Connect vans, and 3 2017 Ford F-250 pickup trucks with a plow and tow packages from Gordo Ford, Woodhaven, Michigan, for a total cost of $256,411.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mr. Centers. Mr. Francis is going to help us with this one.
Yes, I will. Thank you. So this purchase is to replace some of our current vehicles that are in the maintenance fleet that are beyond the reasonable life cycle. What we're going to be doing is replacing those items with these newer items and actually reducing the total number of vehicles in the maintenance fleet, which we have an appropriate need for. We have less staff than we used to have. Some of the current ones that are in the best of condition will be moved to the high schools where they get less wear and tear on them. The newer vehicles will be used district-wide. Gorno Ford was the lowest responsible bidder, and this is from the My Deal Extended Purchasing Program, which is a state bidding consortium, so fulfills the district's requirement for bidding. We do recommend the board approve this purchase.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're
Questions, comments from the board? Just to note that this is a general fund purchase, correct?
Yes. Thank you. I forgot to mention that.
Mrs. Frank.
And this also is an open bid, so any dealer in Livonia or anyone else could have bid on this, correct?
Into the state, the My Deals you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mr. Centers, for the approval of maintenance department vehicles. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
Mr. Centers,
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion passes. That moves us on to item 4E, 6E. Approval to purchase computers for LCTC, CTE 61A. I was never good with my alphabet. Added cost funds. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of 31 Apple desktop computers from Apple Mac Professionals for the LCTC graphic design class for a total cost of $47,554.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Frank. Mr. Willenbar, you'll be helping us with that.
Yes, thank you. I'll refer to it as simply the Career Center.
There we go. Thank you for putting us out of our misery.
But this is a request to, for the approval of to purchase 31 Apple desktop computers. Computers are targeted for the Career Center's graphic design class, whose current computers have aged to the point where they can't they can't install many updates. Apple is a sole source provider for this product, and the funding source is through added cost funding. It's a total cost of $47,554, and request your support for that purchase.
Thank you, Mr. Willenbar. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Bradford.
Can you tell us what budget this is coming from, please?
This will be through the 61A funding, which is a source that the state provides to help out career centers. It's not from the general fund. It's from what's referred to as budget line 61A.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Barrett.
That's exactly what I was going to address. We're all set. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Frank, for the approval to purchase computers for the Career Center, CTE 61A added cost funds. Would you take the roll, Mrs. Bonnefield?
Yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 6F, approval to purchase Chromebooks for LCTC CTE 61A added cost funds. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bradford.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of 90 Dell Chromebooks and 3 carts from Presidio for a total cost of $32,703.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mr. Willenbar.
Again, this is, we're requesting an approval to purchase 90 Chromebooks and 3 housing and charging carts for those Chromebooks. It's for use in the sports medicine, the pre-nursing, pre-med, and medical occupation classes. The laptops that they currently use in that course, again, have aged to the point of non-functioning use, if you will. The vendor is Presidio. It's purchased through the Midwest Higher Education Compact, which is a consortium. The funding source is through the added costs, or again, the 61A funds, which is outside of the general budget, and are funds provided by the state to help with the costs of running the career centers.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Willenbar. Questions or comments from the board? I do have a question, Mr. Willenbar. Is this replacing all of the Chromebooks, or are these new for these particular programs?
They're replacing they currently have laptops that they're using, and it'll replace those aged laptops. So just like the high schools, a lot of the schools have these new Chromebook carts. Now the Career Center will have some Chromebook carts.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield, for the approval to purchase Chromebooks for the LCTC 61 CTE 61A added cost funds. Would you take the roll, Mrs. Bonnefield?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. That takes us to item 6G, approval to purchase flexible furniture for Franklin High School 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of flexible furniture for Franklin High School from Interior Environments in the amount of $73,142.39.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mr. Centers, and Mr. Willenborg. Boy, you're getting as popular as Mr. Francis.
Not quite. This is a request that falls into phase 3 of the 2013 bond secondary furniture enhancements. And through the past efforts, phase 1 and through phase 2, we've purchased thousands of desks, thousands of chairs, tables to enhance classrooms. The effort here is to create creative, inclusive learning spaces for our students in each of the high schools, middle schools, and the Career Center. We've been given a fund to create some of that, to enhance their school environment. Franklin's plan consists of making improvements to the Career Information Center, the room 509, the transitions room, and lab 501. And they'll do that through, purchase of different desks, standing desks, smaller desks, different tables where they can do some small group work, some research, and presentations. Most of the places have charging stations for their devices, be they laptops or their cell phones, and the like. So that's Franklin's plan, and we've reviewed that extensively at the study session and our committee of the whole, and request your support for that plan.
Thank you, Mr. Willenborg. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Bonnefield.
Mr. Willenberg, could you just remind us again how how they got to choose the furniture, that they're not just randomly going out and buying different furniture, and how that process went?
Sure, it's, like I said, each of the high schools has a certain dollar amount to spend, and they worked within their staffs to gather input from the teachers and students of where can we make some enhancements, where can we, what do we need, what could, spark our learning environment. And through that committee work, it led to, improvements in these 3 areas of that school. And it'll consist of, like I said, new seating, new tables, primarily.
Can I make a thought?
Yeah.
Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
So what I was getting at is that they were given how they were given choices of furniture to buy, that they just aren't randomly buying furniture with that we have a selection of furniture that they're able to purchase from, so that I guess for the sake of the public, that they're letting them know how it was purchased, that they're just not like running to Myers or IKEA or something and buying furniture.
I understand your question now.
Okay.
Sure, all the schools have been provided a list of vendors. So most of the schools then, all the schools are generally working through several vendors, and the vendors are coming in and saying, and are developing plans. Say, this is what we could do to this room, this is what we could do to that room. And then the school staffs are deciding from there. So each of the schools generally have worked with a couple vendors. The vendors have created some plans, and they've selected from there.
Okay.
Franklin has used the interior environments.
Yeah, thank you.
Just hopefully
Yes, that was good,
that's a little more
thank you.
clear.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, other questions, Mrs. Frank?
As you noted, this is coming from the bond fund, and I just wanted to again thank the community for passing the bond, because as we go to conferences and we see different schools and what they're doing and their innovation to enhance the learning experience, like you said, and it is an exciting thing to bring that to our school. We are providing just a different way for students to learn and different options, and so I think that's really amazing for our students, and to bring that to our community is really exciting. So thank you for that, and thank you to the community who approved this bond.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Willenberg, I have a question I'm not sure you can answer. Do we know what the balance is in the furniture budget through the bond? Do we know how much is left?
there was 1.3 million left after phase 1 and phase 2. And this will account for, through all the schools, this will account for the majority of what's left, that amount.
Okay. Appreciate it, thank you.
It's my recollection of.
We'll be happy to get you a detailed number in the update this week.
Okay, great. Mrs. Bradford?
Just to add to that, this is Franklin's, the Stevenson and Churchill will also be given the opportunity, or in the process right
And
now.
Holmes, Emerson, and Frost, and the
Thank you.
Career Center, so those are all coming down the pike. Yes.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
And just to assure our parents of elementary age students, that process is just beginning as well. And so the secondary furniture purchases, for the most part, were complete with regard to the 2-person desks, the stand-up desks, the chairs, the regular desks for students. And so they were ready to move on to these flexible furniture options to create these collaborative learning environments. Our elementary schools now are just embarking on that process. And so what you'll see this fall happening at each of our schools are very similar groups coming together to make decisions about some unique learning spaces where they want to provide opportunities for students to be able to collaborate with their teachers, with small groups of learners, utilizing some of the technology that the bond has provided. And so the elementary schools will go through the same process, both the K-4 and the 5-6 schools, within a budget and within guidelines and parameters. And then those recommendations will be coming to you early in 2019. So we anticipate January of 2019. In the meantime, they are very focused on their wonderful playground furniture that is currently being installed. So just to echo your thanks about the bond, we opened our first elementary playground last week and the second one this week, and very grateful for all of these additional options, both for our learners in the classrooms, for our youngsters outside. There are so many different enhancements, whether it's technology, furniture, safety and security, textbooks, etc. We are just so grateful each and every day for the resources that the bond has provided.
And the plan is that there'll be many pictures on the district website of what these areas look like. So they can, it's up, you can view those now on the district website.
Okay,
You know, what Franklin's, those 3 areas will look like with their plan.
Outstanding, thank
Great.
you. Mrs. Burton, did you have a?
The website was what I was going to address.
Okay, very
All
good.
set, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mr. Centers, for the approval to purchase flexible furniture for Franklin High School 2013 bond. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Yes. Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes,
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion passes, thank you. That takes us to item 6H, approval for auditor for the 2017-18 audit. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson?
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District appoint the firm of Plant Moran to audit and prepare the financial report for Livonia Public Schools School District for the 2017-2018 school year at a total cost of $47,500.
Support.
Stereo. I heard Mrs. Burton. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Smith?
Thank you very much. As we discussed in our study session and committee meeting, just a reminder that the state law mandates that we have an annual outside audit done of our financial statements. That goes for all school districts here in the state of Michigan. I'm recommending that we continue with Plant Moran, who has performed our audit for the last several years now, for 3 main reasons. First off, Plant Moran is the leader in K-12 accounting here in the state of Michigan. The second would be the ongoing accounting advice that they offer to us at no cost throughout the school year. So if something comes up, something's new, they're just a phone call away and are happy to walk us through situations, and that's very much great value to us. Lastly, the efficiencies with using a firm that we've used in the past. Plant Moran is familiar with our processes, our system, our people, and that's something, should we decide to switch to a new firm, it would inevitably take them time to familiarize themselves. So we're able to, they're able to come in and just jump right in with our audit. And so it's for those main reasons that I'm recommending we continue with Plant Moran for this 17-18 school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
Yes, a few years back, we had some folks that had expressed a concern that we were using the same firm for an extended period of time and suggested we look at a different firm. We did so. They did a good job for us also. And I'm pleased to say in all of my years on the board, we've always come back with the highest report from the accounting firms, whether or not we used Plant Moran or if we had looked at another firm. I'm absolutely in favor of using Plant Moran for all the reasons that you expressed, but I wanted the public to know that we haven't always used them. We have moved it around a little bit just to make sure that we have different eyes looking at that, and across the board in the last many, many years, as far back as I know, we've always had stellar reports. So thank you, and thank you to you and your department for going through all the work of, number one, keeping our books in such great condition, but also preparing for that audit and going through that, which is no small task either.
Our pleasure.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Burton, for the appointment of auditor for the 2017-18 audit. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. That will then take us to item 7, personnel matters, and item A, teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment for the 2017-18 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
Stereo again. I heard Mrs. Bonifield, so we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Archibald, can you help us with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. These teachers have been interviewed along with many other applicants for the vacancies which existed in our instructional program. We believe these individuals are the most qualified for the positions and recommend they be approved for employment. Just as a point of information, because we are filling positions what might seem to be a little bit late in the year, one of these positions is for a resignation, and that's one of our psychologist positions. We've tried to go as far as we could without having to fill that position, and fortunately we're able to find someone worthy of hire, and so we'd like to do that. And the other one is to replace Mr. Rivera, who was moved from the classroom to an assistant principal position.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, for the approval of teachers. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. President Johnson?
Yes.
Motion carried. I'm gonna get it.
That works. Motion
Sorry.
carries. Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. That takes us to item 7B, retirements. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Burton.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for the services rendered by Keith Armstrong, Deborah Dugan, Lisa Friedman, Timothy Hinchman, Christy Jason, Barbara Jones, Leah Cluck, Lori Nersessian, Carol Whitefoot, Connie Zucker Bergolian.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mr. Archibald.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Tonight we bring before you the names of 10 individuals representing a cross-section of employees across the district who will be retiring. These individuals leave with a combined 244.9, or roughly an average of 24 and a half years of experience. On behalf of the district, I would like to thank these individuals for their years of dedicated service to the students of Livonia Public Schools and ask that the board adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation in their honor.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Okay. Questions or comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton,
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford,
Yes.
Mr. Centers,
Yes.
Mrs. Frank,
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, motion carries, thank you. That'll take us to item 7C, resignations. This is for our information only. So we move on to item 7D, sympathy resolution for Amy Vance. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Bonnefield.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached sympathy resolution for the family of Amy Vance.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Burton. Mrs.
Archibald.
Oquist.
Yes, we certainly, Mr. Archibald is going to share our sympathy resolution. Our hearts and our, warmest thoughts go out to the family of Amy Vance, who was a valued member of our transportation team. And we were so saddened to learn of her passing, and we are so grateful for all that she has given to Livonia Public Schools, to the students that she served, and just was a colleague who was enjoyed by many throughout our district. Mr. Archibald?
And if I may add, before reading the resolution, as you know, our board participates in, our board, you would be surprised to find out that you participate, to know that our drivers, some of our drivers participate in the bus rodeo, which is coming up, and they have T-shirts made each year, and this year Amy's name will be on the T-shirt as the vanity license plate, as a tribute to her, which is only appropriate. If I may please read the sympathy resolution. Amy Vance, whereas the Board of Education was very saddened to hear of the untimely death of Miss Amy Vance, and whereas Amy was a vital member of the Livonia Public Schools School District staff as a transportation driver from February 1996 through June 2017, and whereas she consistently demonstrated her outstanding dedication to students, parents, and staff, and whereas she will be remembered with great fondness and with a profound sense of gratitude for the immeasurable contributions she made to our district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District offers its deepest sympathy to the family and friends of Miss Amy Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald.
Thank you.
Questions, comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of those who work in our transportation department. They have an incredibly challenging job. I can't imagine doing what they do and driving down the road, making sure everything is safe, making sure our students stay safe when they have the number of students behind them that are charged with their care. On top of that, they are literally the first LPS face they see in the morning and the last LPS face they see in the evening. So their interaction with our students is really, really important. It sets the tone for their day, coming into school and going off of the school bus and going into their homes. So I'd just like to take a moment and thank those of our staff who work in our transportation department. We could not do our jobs without you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Burton, and with the board's indulgence, I would ask that we make this unanimous. Yes. Any problem? Thank you. Show it as unanimous. All right, and that takes us to item 8, hearing from board members. 8A, first reading of board policy BHA, Code of Ethics. As the community may know, the board each year, although we're a little late this year, reviews our board operating policies, specifically our Code of Ethics. And I find it somewhat interesting that each year, notwithstanding that we went over the very same document the year before, things change. And we find that there may be little tweaks that are necessary. And we have discussed this at the Committee of the Whole. It's something that we as a board keep in mind as the year goes on. And there were a couple of tweaks, and if you'll indulge me, I'll just go over what they were for this year. And again, this is just a first reading. This will come up again in our next regular meeting for a vote. So the first change that we're making is bullet point number 5 that will read, I will review and evaluate all policies, bylaws, procedures, and processes, and we added of the board, and we'll work to make desired changes so they would be current and relevant. The next change that we're making is bullet point 7. They aren't specifically numbered, but it's the 7th bullet point down. That says, I will come to board meetings prepared to discuss and take action on all agenda items. I will study the material in the board packet, and the new language that we're adding is seeking clarification if needed prior to board meetings. And we're eliminating the remainder of the language in that paragraph. We felt that it was a little redundant, and the added language is a little clearer. The next bullet point is the 10th bullet point down, and we're simply changing one word. It read, I will render all decisions based on the available facts, and this will say, I will base all decisions on the available facts. So it's just a wording change. The next is the first bullet point on the second page. And again, we're simply adding a couple of words. It will say, I will respect the consensus, comma, and support the decisions of the board and their implementation. We're removing one word, support, and adding it earlier on. The next one is the 6th bullet point down, and it's the second sentence. We are removing a slight portion, taking out respect the, and it will say, I will keep confidential all information that is privileged under applicable law, including closed session discussions. We felt that this actually covers two separate situations, and we wanted to be clear on our language in that particular paragraph. The only other change is the 4th bullet point under board president, and it simply adds into that that to the extent it does not conflict with board policy or state law. And it's just the addition of the words or state law. Any other comments tonight? Everybody good with those changes? All right, so again, being a first reading, this will be up at the next regular meeting for our consideration and vote. So that will take us then on to item 8B, and this is the second reading of Board Policy IDFA, Interscholastic Athletics. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bradford.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee and adopt board policy language per the attached document for Board Policy IDFA, Interscholastic Athletics.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mr. Willenberg will help us with this.
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder, this started with finding an inconsistency between two of our policies, and we certainly wanted to correct that. Now, we spent time through our study session in the Committee of the Whole to clean up language in the policy as well, in terms of taking out reference to intramural sports. But like I said, the key was to make this correction with the inconsistency with one policy talking about earning a varsity letter after 4 years of athletic participation in the same sport, and another policy, the administrative regs, talking about earning a letter after 3 years. After what has been practice, and after discussion through our athletic council, we've judged, of course, that it's the 3-year plan is the correct plan, and that's how the policies read. That has been corrected, and request your support of those policy corrections.
Thank you, Mr. Willenborg. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
Mr. Willenborg, the board votes on the board policies, which are before us tonight. The corresponding administrative procedures, have those already been corrected in the policy book?
Yes.
They have,
Yes.
okay, thank you very much. And this was brought to our attention by a staff member, and we thank you very much for doing so. With 600 pages of policy, bylaws, and administrative procedures, things slide through the cracks every now and then, especially when a policy or a procedure might fall into 2 different categories, such as student athletics and finances, for example. So sometimes when something gets changed in one, we might miss changing it in another. So thank you very much for being diligent when you're reading policies, and if anybody in the public ever notices something that looks amiss in our policy book, which is available on our website, we do encourage you to let us know so we can make that correction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Bonifield, to approve Board Policy IDFA, Interscholastic Athletics. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 8C, second reading of Board Policy JBD, Homeless Students. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee and adopt board policy language per the attached document for Board Policy JBD, Homeless Students.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Mr. Willenborg, or is it Mr. McDonald? Musical chairs down there.
Thank you, President Johnson. The essence of the changes that we are recommending is to reflect the actual title of the act, which is McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. In previous versions, we do not have the word assistance in there. And one additional change, again, to get in line with the act itself, which is the removal of awaiting foster care placement. That is no longer one of the qualifications for meeting the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to adopt Board Policy JBD, Homeless Students. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to item 8D, hearing from board members. As has become customary with the board, instead of having 7 different people, perhaps being very repetitious, we've chosen one board member who will speak for the board. Other board members obviously still have the opportunity, if they have some comments to make, they can chime in. Tonight we're relying upon Mr. Centers to speak for the board. Thank you.
First, I want to thank all of our students and community that were on the agenda tonight, that were flexible enough to change their plans and will be joining us at another meeting. I want to repeat the thank you to our staff and our community, who really responded well this morning to unexpected power outages and additional with our complications with our alert system. It sounds like most people really took it in stride, and they really worked hard to make sure that the kids got where they needed to be, got home, and that everyone is safe, and that our buildings are going to be ready to go tomorrow. It was great to see our robotics teams in. They have done a fantastic job this year. It's been so exciting to watch them. And to the Warriors going on to Worlds, that's going to be really amazing to watch. And I can't wait to go out to Cobo Hall the weekend of the 24th and see them at work. We made approved several upgrades this evening to our buildings, to vehicles, furniture. So exciting things coming to LPS. And we also spoke about playgrounds. So lots of things happening, and I think our students will really appreciate the changes. We welcomed some new hires this evening. We're excited to see new people come into the district that are qualified and will bring great energy. At the same time, there's a lot of experience leaving the district, which we're sad to see go, but a little bit wish them luck with their retirements. We also paid our respect to Amy Vance, who in the Vance family, who were very sad to hear about the passing. Finally, we've upgraded some policies that were in need of some revisions, and our cabinet worked very hard on those, so I'd like to thank them again for that. That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Nothing? Thank you to the staff for hanging in there tonight under less than ideal circumstances. We certainly appreciate it. You were able to get us on. Fred, thank you for getting everything ready for us so that we could at least get our meeting taped and people can tune in tomorrow night or whenever they want to. There's nothing else on the agenda. Does anyone else have any board business this evening? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, Fred, you can shut it off.